As I was thinking about tonight, this past week, and how to best frame the vision for planting a church in Vancouver for you guys, some of which are, a part of that, and many of which are not, and how to do that in a brief time span. Bear with me, it won't be long. As I was considering all those things, something occurred to me, that I am a man of privilege through no known fault of my own, some cocktail of heredity and genetics and circumstance, I'm sure. I am, among many other things, a white American male, so consequently I am a man of privilege. Privileged in the sense that often, as a result of various systemic injustices, not always, but often, Americans enjoy certain luxuries and privileges that people who are not American do not, socially, culturally, and otherwise. White people often enjoy certain luxuries that people who are not white do not, and men certainly enjoy many luxuries that women do not, and this is, of course, a very unfortunate truth. But understanding my own privilege is not about guilt or overly simplistic blanket statements. And though it does stand to frame the way that I understand and empathize with folks with different stories, these differences needn't crowd my attention and rule my focus, but they got me thinking. Because the way of Jesus, by its very nature, draws me out of comfort and out of luxury, into discomfort and into challenge, out of privilege and into low standing. And somehow, paradoxically, there I stand to discover freedom. It's like from life to death to life again. And Jesus spoke at length about this concept he called the kingdom of God, a new reality erupting from the seams of a broken world, bringing with it healing and restoration and wholeness, a new humanity, a new city, a new world. And yet, the status quo, or the world as it is, the way that things are, it is a tangle of entropy, in many a sense altogether uninterested in Jesus' vision for a world restored and made new. So for those of us who have become disciples of Jesus of Nazareth, the teachings of our rabbi draw us out of things as they are, often deliberately turning us against a pervasive current, and we stand pressed forward, resolute, against all odds to follow and live the way of Jesus. And some, not all, but some of you here tonight, I'm sure, are not unlike myself, in that you've known some sense of privilege, if not genetically or circumstantially. Certainly a great many of us have known comfort, and dare I say, most of us probably have known comfort and know comfort well even now. I know I do. And then in steps Jesus to disrupt the comfort. Because the cost of following Jesus is great. It has an immediacy to it. It has an urgency. And once initiated, it's no good looking back. This isn't just a weekend retreat. This isn't a seminar. If you lose your nerve before you hit the bottom, you'll never really succeed. The way of Jesus is an affront to the status quo. Wherever it goes, it comes through various means, not least among which is a people. It comes through a people, and it goes to a place. And that brings me to the vision to plant a church in Vancouver, Washington, a vision that's not at all unlike all that we've been steeped in over the last few weeks. Followers of Jesus choosing to live together as families in community with one another. Followers of Jesus living as missionaries sent out to the city to love and serve and share the gospel. Disciples of Jesus learning to be with Jesus, to learn his teachings, to become like him, to carry on his work in the world. Gathering together around the bread and the cup on a Sunday, and then scattering across the city of Vancouver in missional communities all week long, serving the church, giving time and resources and finances, essentially to be a people in a place. But for myself and for a small band of brothers and sisters around me, that place is going to be Vancouver, Washington. And though the Spirit of God is active already in Vancouver, the way of Jesus is moving forward, and churches and disciples in Vancouver before us, God is uniquely inviting us to do something different in the city, and we want in, to disrupt things as they are, in Vancouver in the best way possible, and indeed to disrupt our own comfort. And for me personally, there was a time when an itinerant lifestyle came quite naturally. I was, I believe, called by God to travel from city to city and state to state and country to country to transmit the way of Jesus via this oddball vehicle of a punk rock band. And the subversive element, to slight the status quo, it all comes quite naturally via a punk rock band. So eventually, I found myself more and more drawn out of that world and into a world of strange consistency, to live and stay in one place, to have a family, and then go figure, apparently come work at a church. And at the time, this was a great disruption of my comfort. I found myself with, the occasional itch, lamenting my forfeited glamour of living in a van and sleeping on floors every night and a per diem of $5 a day. Those were truly the days. And as absurd as it sounds, it was what I knew. I liked it. Felt like I was pretty good at it and felt quite alive, and for better or for worse, it was quite comfortable. The irony is, of course, that my new world eventually became something that I will step out of once again, which is Portland and Bridgetown and you guys. In steps Jesus to disrupt my comfort. Now, when the conversation about Vancouver first surfaced, it was an exciting but very scary, intimidating, and in many ways uncomfortable possibility for my wife Abby and myself, one that we both became sure over time was the leading of God. And if I may loose a disquieting thought into the room tonight, I think that maybe some of you guys are supposed to come with us to Vancouver to plant a church. Because for many of us, a vision series like the one we've been in these last few weeks, after all these years of talking about these things, it becomes a soft sell. It becomes an easier pitch. To be sure, it is a challenging and often alienating vision to love and serve a city, to live faithfully as disciples of Jesus in community with one another, to think of church as far more and far greater than an event on a weekend. It's certainly not for everyone. But some of you guys, we had you at Portland. And that can be a beautiful thing. Some of you, I think this vision jibes quite well with a nice, neat little niche that you've carved out for yourself here in this city at this time. It fits, it's familiar, and that doesn't mean that it's bad per se. But for better or for worse, it's comfortable. And please don't misunderstand me. If you resonate with Bridgetown's vision to be a people in a place here in Portland, I am in no way accusing you of complacency whatsoever. You know as well as anyone that even if this is a soft sell, this is a sacrificial way of life that we've invited you guys into. It costs something. And believe me, there is enough in the way of Jesus to make you uncomfortable wherever you live. And you guys that have stepped out and said, we're in, we want to do this, we believe in Bridgetown's vision, you guys are honestly an incredible encouragement to your leadership. I really can't say that enough. But I do believe some of you here, some of you with no intention yet of relinquishing your place in this city, your access to the things you love, the rhythms to which you've grown accustomed. Some of you, God means to send to Vancouver with us. And believe me, I'm not in any way threatened by differences from city to city to city. I completely understand and acknowledge all that's desirable and wonderful about a place like Portland. I actually love this place. And I love Vancouver too. I have history there. I enjoy spending time there. But my shared vision to be a people in a place goes much deeper than one city being more or less desirable or cool than any other city. I believe that I have been invited by God to love Vancouver, to adopt it as my own city, the good, the bad, the cool, the uncool, the comfortable, the uncomfortable, to look out at that city and say freely that I have been invited by God to choose her, and I choose her. Because I want my rootedness and my faithfulness to a city, my theology of place, as it were, to be built on something far greater than whether or not that city is desirable or comfortable or deemed cool by the culture of the day. Because to cater our theology of place around what we perceive to be the desirability of that place is consumerism. And at that point, the theology of place very quickly devolves into the idolatry of place. But cities, I think, are in some sense, not all that dissimilar to our missional communities. Sometimes the connections in missional communities are pre-existent. They're lifelong friendships. Sometimes a rapport blossoms effortlessly in the soil of shared interests or mutual affection. And those are all wonderful scenarios, believe me. They're very helpful if you're in a missional community. But other times, a community of people looks to one another and announces, I don't know you, but I have been invited to choose you, and I choose you. There's good, there's bad, there's natural, there's unnatural, there's comfortable, there's uncomfortable, but we have this invitation in Jesus in common. So come, let's choose one another again and again and again. And some of you, I think, have been invited or are being invited or will be invited by God to choose Vancouver with us. Because you have gifts that we need, or you have faithfulness that you can offer, or you have wisdom to impart, or finances to contribute, or prophecy to speak. Many of you guys should stay here in Portland. That's your invitation. But some of you, I think, should come with us, and that is your invitation. Our team is this beautifully ragtag group of natives to Vancouver, faithful transplants, and then outright newcomers. We have folks like my friends Scott and Kristen, who have been caring for missional communities in Vancouver long before I was ever in the picture. And we have folks like my friend Travis, who runs a business in Vancouver, and all of them totally invested in Bridgetown's vision, but hoping and praying to realize that same vision in their own city. And then we have folks like my brother Patrick and his wife Vanessa, who are quite happy here in Portland, never lived in Vancouver before, but soon will pack their things, move to a different city to go help plant church. And our church is going to be called Van City. As Bridgetown is to Portland, Van City is one nickname among many for Vancouver, and this is a deliberate gesture on our part to identify with the place to which we have been sent. Solidarity sort of thing, to be a people in a place. And some of you guys, I know what it's like, even if you don't live there or whatever, you're familiar with it. Maybe you have family that live there. So Vancouver's not that alien a locale. It's a 10-minute ride over a bridge unless there's traffic, and then it's like 3 hours, give or take. But other you guys, even though some of you can see it, it is as alien a locale as like a foreign country. So it's an interesting place, really. It's this bizarre blend of city and suburb and countryside, and home to all sorts of people who fondly identify with each of those three. In some ways, Vancouver's not terribly unlike Portland. The downtown area is this delightful amalgamation of the urban and the communal. There's great food and coffee and local business and art and culture and concern for community and sustainability. In fact, some Portland business owners and restaurateurs have drawn their attention to Vancouver for its unique enthusiasm for culture, kind of held in tandem with this small neighborhood energy thing that it has going on. The city is actually in this spot of growing rapidly right now, and we want to be there to experience that journey with it. I had coffee with a gentleman this last week who lives out in Vancouver, but whose work involves a tremendous amount of travel all over the world. And he referred to Vancouver as one of the country's best kept secrets. And I like that. I thought I would put that on our business cards or whatever we have. And then like many cities, beyond the small reach of downtown, there are suburbs and families and schools, and there's the developed and the rural, and concrete lots and countryside and poverty and privilege and country club elite and backwoods isolation. It's all there. And our vision is to be a people in a place. Small groups of family and friends all over the city who share their lives, their resources, their burdens, their suffering, their joy. Small groups made up of disciples of Jesus, learning and pursuing the way of Jesus together in the city of Vancouver. And these small groups of disciples will come together regularly downtown in the population density in the midst of people and business and culture, and gather together around the bread and the cup of Jesus to worship and learn from the scriptures and stir one another on to follow Jesus. And like I said, for many of us, embracing this sort of urban missional approach to church after all these years of talking about it, here in Portland, it becomes a soft sell for some of us. But in a place like Vancouver that's more disparate, with more dichotomy, to be a people in a place presents a new set of challenges. And we're aware of that. It can often become an even more subversive invitation. And as I meet and talk to pastors and churches in Vancouver, many of them who are familiar with what we've been up to at Bridgetown over the past few years, they all say the same thing, which is something like, you guys are up to something different and good, and we haven't all figured out how to tap into that same thing yet here in Vancouver, and we need what you're doing here. Because even if we could, I'm not sure that we could, but even if we could, we have no interest in becoming like a giant suburban megachurch or something. We have no interest in emphasizing an event on a Sunday over and against what happens all week long. We're not after a shiny new facility or better kids programs or a cooler youth group or, better bands that are more young and more hip. Or none of that stuff could interest us less. But to be a people in a place, to love and serve the city of Vancouver and missional communities spread out across the city, the kingdom of God coming to the businesses and schools and families and people of Vancouver, not through some event on a weekend, but through the people of God in the city. To invite the urban and the suburban and the rural all out of their comfort and into the mission of God's people. To see a macro community like this one, made up of people young and old from radically different backgrounds and paradigms, come together to live out the way of Jesus. Community instead of individualism, simplicity instead of materialism, radical generosity rather than consumerism, peace rather than violence, and on down the list. People who have just met Jesus and people who have been following him for years, all coming together with the same express purpose, to see God's kingdom come in Vancouver as it is in heaven. That's our dream. For this dream, I think that those of us who have been called to do so are ready and willing to disrupt our comfort. We're ready to take the long road. We are a very small group of people, content to grow slow, content to be a family with a subversive rallying cry that alienates the many and attracts the few. And we, the few, I think, will go happily, eagerly into what will be the great disruption. So I've asked John Mark to come up and pray for us. If you guys are at all interested in what we're doing, or you think that might be something God's calling you to, you can go to jesuschurch.org/Vancouver. We meet every month at the Vancouver Vineyard Church to pray and talk out the vision of the church. The next meeting is actually going to be this coming Wednesday. So if you want to know more about that stuff, you can go to the website or follow us on social media.